Lawmakers are looking at Congress and looking for new ways to provide extra aid to the American people. Some people are also suggesting that one-time relief checks be approved, while others would like to see a monthly check signed into law. Watch until the end to learn what stimulus programs you can receive right now. And I know many of you are waiting for your fourth check, and there are about 472 million payments that have been recently issued by the Fed, totaling about $803 billion. The stimulus checks were the result of the CARES Act, which Congress passed to manage the fallout from the crisis. Households receive payments of up to $1,200 and $600 and $1,400 a person, respectively. Census Bureau survey data shows most households use the funds for food and household products and to make utility rent, vehicle and mortgage payments, and to a lesser extent, households use them for clothing, savings, investment, and recreational goods. Inflation has made living costs unaffordable for many Americans at this point. Gas prices are up, grocery costs are rising, and many people are facing higher than ever utility bills. Making matters worse is that many people exhausted their savings during the crisis and have little to no cash reserves to fall back on. At this point, a number of states have surplus in their budget. And rather than spend the money, they're dishing out to the public of people. Colorado residents, for instance, are in line for a $400 check this summer, while those in Indiana can expect to pay and receive $125. It pays to see if your state has plans to issue rebates to its residents, because if it does, you could have a pile of cash coming your way. The deadline approaches for the Pennsylvania legislature to pass a new budget. Support for spending some of the state's billions of dollars remaining stimulus money and surplus tax revenue is gaining bipartisan action. The state's Secretary of Human Services is calling on lawmakers to pass legislation for Governor Tom Wolf's proposal to send $2,000 checks to Pennsylvanians. Many officials have agreed that the payments would be a big help as prices for everything from gas to groceries rise. The administration will use the federal funding from the American Rescue Plan to send payments to residents across the state. Households with an income of $80,000 or less will be eligible. According to Wolf's office, Democratic leaders in the state Senate and House have introduced legislation to make the plan a reality. The IRS has been slow to process tax returns that were filed on paper, but if you submit yours everybody by the April 18th filing deadline, you might soon see your refund show up in the mail or at your bank account. The average tax refund this year is $3,000, so if you're aligned for a comparable payday, that can easily take the place of a missing stimulus check. The IRS has warned about challenges this tax season and a slew of other automated notices already causing distress for filers. Some taxpayers who sent last year's returns and paid their balance have received a notice saying they may lose their credit for payment if they don't file their 2021 to 2020 tax return. However, the agency said many of these notices are because of their backlog of unprocessed returns. If you're still waiting for a tax refund, it may be accruing interest and the rate jumps to 4% on July 1st. Typically the IRS has after the filing deadline to process returns and send refunds. After that, the agency takes on compounding interest, and tied to the federal short-term rate, IRS interest currently falls below 8.3% annual inflation, but is still significantly higher.
If you think inflation's bad now, think of what would have happened if BBB had passed. Just think of how much more money would have been thrown onto the fire, how much more gas. So I'm very concerned. We're a great nation. We always will be. We're going to make sure we stay great if we can pull all the divergent parts together and say, let's work together. You don't get everything you want. I don't get everything I want. But together, we'll have more than we have right now. And that's American. That's when we're at our best. When we pulled together as a nation in World War II, we whipped anybody's ass who came in front of us, okay? Why? Because we were together. This pandemic, where if you wear a mask, you're one party. If you don't wear a mask, you're another party. I mean, how petty do we get? Yeah. If masks were the thing to wear to deal with a pandemic, wear the mask. Right. We've now concluded that we can measure people for what they are by things they do or don't do. That's wrong. Let's address it. Look, I put this on every morning. We are the greatest nation on earth. There'll never be another America, ever, ever. Believe me. And I'm passionate about that. That said, if we don't address the enemy within is our divisiveness. If we don't address that, our future won't be as bright as it would be if we did. So
I agree 100% with you. I agree with going back and tracing this back more than 2 decades, and it seems to get worse every year. You would think that there would be a common enemy like COVID that we could all unite around. That seemed like it could have been a World War II moment. Where else do you find a common threat, a common enemy, something that makes people put aside their differences and say, yes, we agree with each other on these things. Let's celebrate that.
You start with a common point of view. I mean, for example, go back to inflation last year. I didn't conclude that this chairman did what he did, or I should say didn't do what he should have done.
Fed chairman.
Because he wanted to get reappointed. That's unfair. I have no way of knowing it, and I shouldn't reach that conclusion. On the other hand, I can understand people connecting the dots and saying, hey, wait a minute. Look, a guy that I think gets it right better than anybody else, more than anybody else, is Stan Druckenmiller. He and I talk every day. And last year, we were both saying how insane it was that we weren't addressing the...
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to my friend from Pennsylvania and the Rules Committee. I just want to remind folks that the economy under Joe Biden has created over 8 million jobs since he took office. The unemployment rate has dropped from 6.4% to 3.6% under President Biden, and his first year was the greatest year of job creation in American history. The Federal Reserve has found that the household financial well-being reached an all-time high last year, and GDP grew in the president's first year by 5.2%, the fastest rate since 1984. The U.S. was the first advanced economy that reached pre-pandemic rates of growth. And we're seeing wages increased for workers. There's no doubt that inflation and the high cost of gasoline is a challenge. That's the purpose of some of our actions today, is to hold the private sector accountable to be responsible to their consumers and the American people. That's why these bills are on the floor, to do something about inflation and
the issue of inflation. I saw it in our...
The Republican leader.
Moments ago, the country got yet another terrible monthly inflation report under the Biden administration. Yet again, the data confirm what working families already know painfully well. Rampant inflation and soaring prices are crushing the American people. Experts had predicted another red-hot inflation report, around 7%. Even that alone would have meant we were still trapped inside the worst inflation in 40 years. But reality turned out to be even worse than that. Turns out inflation this past year hasn't been 7%, it's been 7